I recently managed to get my hands on an RTX 3080 Founders Edition, and I managed to swap with my RTX 6800 XT. If you're interested in knowing how I managed to get one of these, check out this video up above. Might give you some tips on how to secure GPUs and CPUs in this crazy market right now. With that being said, I want to get into some of the insights I found after testing both cards for quite a bit of time, and I want to share with you guys some of the reasons why I think it was better for me, at least, to go with the Nvidia cards for this generation, and this might be helpful to you when you're presented with the chance of going between the AMD cards and the Nvidia cards. So quick disclosure, this is going to be as non-biased as possible. Don't really have any loyalty to either company. I think it's kind of dumb, guys, to have a loyalty towards a multi-billion-dollar corporation that doesn't really give a damn about you. They've already demonstrated they don't care. But in the situation of having two products available to you, I just want to give you a clear-cut answer on what I think is the superior product at this moment. So for reference, the two cards that I had extensive time with was the ASRock Phantom OC 6800 XT and the Nvidia 3080 Founders Edition cards, which were both in my personal rigs with the Ryzen 5900X. I also had a little bit of time with the 3090 MSI Supreme, but that's on my brother's rig, and I know it's not a really fair comparison to compare the 3090 to a 6800 XT. But now let's begin. So reason number one, encoders, specifically Nvidia's encoders. The NVENC encoder I found was really superior to AMD's equivalent. I found that when I was screen recording gameplay footage or just regular screen footage using Radeon's Relive software, the quality wasn't really there compared to when I was recording through Nvidia's Shadowplay, especially with HDR enabled. If you want to see some of the screen footage right now, this is with HDR enabled. A lot of the footage looks kind of washed out, the colors don't seem right, and with Nvidia's Shadowplay I didn't really have these issues, and it's just something to keep in mind. I think it's specifically with the encoder, the NVENC encoder, and this is also with equivalent bit rates. I tried upping the bit rates on the Radeon Relive program, and it doesn't really improve the quality of the footage as well as I thought it would. So instead of getting like bigger files in order to try to get like nicer footage, the NVENC encoder seems to do a really great job handling that. So the Nvidia video cards also work better with DaVinci Resolve, which is the software I use to edit these videos, and it was just a smoother experience in general. I found that with the ASRock 6800 XT I was having a lot more issues as far as rendering and editing videos, and I also read online this is a common experience for others using these AMD cards to try to edit videos. The next thing I want to mention is DLSS 2.0, which DLSS stands for Deep Level Super Sampling, where it's sort of an AI technique that helps upsample images from a lower resolution to a higher resolution. I don't really want to get into detail because I don't really know enough, and I don't think I'm smart enough to explain it, and others have done a lot better job in explaining this. A good channel to check out is Red Gaming Tech. They have an entire video on explaining what this is, and they'll go into in-depth implications on this for gaming and other apps, so check it out if you're interested. But the 5-year-old layman explanation is that it'll give you free performance even on lower end cards. As long as the game supports it, you can play on basically lower resolutions but with higher image quality. And in the newer iterations of it, you can't really even tell that this is going on. When DLSS 1.0 was out, it was pretty easy to see if you had DLSS on, but the image would look really smudged, like you smear Vaseline all over it. Nowadays it's kind of harder, especially in the newer games, to tell when it's on and when it's not. It was kind of niche before where the supported games was very small, but this list keeps growing, and recently with Unreal Engine they actually have a native plugin now with DLSS, so I think we're going to see a lot more games with it going forward. Even older games are starting to support DLSS. A game that I was very pumped about, it came out early access last year, Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord, has just announced that they're having this feature, so very interested to see how that comes out and how that improves performance going down the line. And I really think this is just going to become the norm now. It'll just be a feature in most games. AMD doesn't really have an equivalent yet. They supposedly are working on it, but it's not out. We have no idea how it's going to work, and we have no idea if it's going to work, so just something to keep in mind, especially for gaming. The next point I want to bring up, which will probably be region specific, I live in the US, so this might not hold true for you depending on your locality, is price. The price of the AMD cards are ridiculous, especially the AIB cards. They've been upcharged, so you can't really find an AMD 6800 XT for less than $1,000 US. At least for me, I haven't found any. Whereas with the Nvidia 3080s, you can still find them sometimes around $800 to $900 depending on where you're looking, what kind of AIB and what kind of retailer you're going for. And it's still possible to get the Founders Edition cards from Best Buy, and those are typically the best prices. I mean, I got the Founders Edition for $700 US, and I'm talking retail. Street prices are different on eBay and second-hand retailers. It might be easier to get the AMD cards, but I'm talking MSRP. It's easier to get the 30 series RTX cards closer to MSRP rather than the 6800 XTs. This also holds true for the lower end cards like the 3060s and 3060 Ti's, the 6800s, and also the upper tier cards, the 6900 XTs and the 3090s as well. Another point I want to bring up are crashes. So this might be just exclusive to my card, the Phantom OC 6800 XT, but I found that I was getting a ton of crashes, especially when I was playing the Division 2, but other games as well, I was experiencing crashes. And I looked online and saw that it might have been something to do with the drivers. I uninstalled, installed drivers, did the whole shebang. I didn't really get too much success with that. This was especially true when I tried to undervolt or overclock or adjust the fan profile for the card. I was finding that I was getting a little bit higher temps when I was playing on stock fan profile. So anytime I tried to set those up and make them go higher, I would get crashes when the GPU utilization was getting near 95 to 99%. And I didn't really dig that. It was very annoying, especially I play a lot of online multiplayer co-op type games, and it just really messes up the experience when you're having that. It negates any type of performance upgrade you might have, because I play basically in 1440p, and I know in a lot of games the 6800 XT is actually better than the 3080 and 1440p, but it doesn't really matter if the game is crashing. I mean, who really cares how many frames you get at that point? Another point I wanted to make is about Geforce Experience. So the Geforce Experience application, when you're recording through Shadowplay, it actually sorts the footage in separate folders depending on what game you're playing. To me, this is a big time saver, because in the Radeon Relive software, it bunches everything and throws into a big captures folder, so you have tons of files to sort through, and you get all this footage. All you have is basically dates, so you don't really know what game belongs to what. And if you wanted to get into any type of content creation or just streaming or things like that, it just doesn't work. It makes things really complicated to keep things organized if you don't use anything that pre-sorts it. Whereas in Geforce Experience, it sorts in separate folders depending on what type of game you're playing or if you're doing any type of desktop capture. So that was a big deal for me. Another point I wanted to make, this one is going to be a little bit controversial for a lot of the gamers. I know they don't, it's like a sticking point for them, is cryptocurrency mining performance, specifically Ethereum mining performance. At least for the Radeon 6000 series, they're not as proficient or efficient in mining as the Ampere cards, so the RTX 3000 series. And I think that goes across the board. So I know a lot of people are going to say the same excuses I've been reading online. It's a huge waste of electricity, it's a drain on the environment, global warming and all that. So very short tangent warning, but if a person wants to use their own property, I mean, they bought this GPU and they want to use it whatever way they want, they're welcome to do that. And if there's an environmental concern about that, I don't think pointing at gamers that, you know, use their card, or let's say they have two cards and they're mining in their spare time, is really anything compared to what the federal and state and local governments do in various parts of the world. So governments waste resources with reckless abandon. Trust me, I know, I work for the government, and the amount of waste that goes on unchecked is just astounding. And I don't really see anybody pointing the fingers at them. So until I see gamers pointing their fingers at the government for wasting electricity and, you know, doing their harmful impact upon the environment, I'm talking, you know, EPA, Federal Reserve, military industrial complex, wherever you want to call it, I don't see anybody talking about that. So I don't think anybody should be taking issue with what the random game is doing to recoup some of his costs for building a PC, especially with overinflated prices of parts. Now, rant over. Appreciate your patience with that. That being said, mining is just a lot more profitable with the Nvidia cards, and a lot of people are recouping their costs within, you know, 6 to 7 months. Assuming that cryptocurrency stays up and stays in these conditions, then you can buy a card and basically, depending on what card you bought and what price you bought it at and what your electricity costs are, you can recoup in anywhere from, you know, 5 to 9 months depending on the conditions and if, you know, cryptocurrency stays that way. Just something to keep in mind. But for the sake of being balanced, I don't want to say everything was good compared to AMD. There are some things that I think the AMD platform or the Radeon RDNA 2 platform does better. One thing is the internal software, or the Wattman/Adrenalin Radeon driver software. So in Wattman, you can actually just do all your overclocking, undervolting, all that fan curve stuff, all within the Radeon platform. You don't have to download a secondary software, unlike in Nvidia. As far as I know, you have to download something else on top of Geforce Experience. So I use MSI Afterburner right now, which seems to be the most popular thing, but I don't really like having an additional software. But this, for me personally, this point was moot just because I couldn't really do any undervolt or anything without the card crashing on me. Another thing to keep in mind is that at stock settings, the AMD cards tend to be a little bit more energy efficient. They just have less power consumption. resolution. You can mitigate this somewhat with undervolting, but at stock, they are better for their performance. One other thing I wanted to mention, which I don't see AMD, I guess, touting enough, is Radeon image sharpening. So this is sort of a software trick that makes images have more fidelity. And then one trick that you can use, this is in the Sapphire Strix boost software, but you don't really need the Sapphire Strix to do it, but you can create custom resolutions that are lower than the native resolution that you're using your monitor at, and it'll upscale it somewhat and give you better performance because you're rendering lower custom resolution. And the cool thing about this is it isn't game specific, meaning the coders don't have to put this in, devs don't have to put this in. As long as you can change the resolution on your game, you can employ this trick. I did want to briefly talk about performance though. So I usually game in 1440p, and at 1440p, the two cards, 1600 XT and the 3080, are basically a wash. Some games are better at certain cards and certain games are better at the other card. But at 1080p, the AMD cards tend to be better, and at 4K, the RTX 30 series tends to be better. And there also is a case for if you have a pretty outdated CPU that your card will probably run better with an AMD GPU just because of the way the architecture works. A channel called Hardware Unboxed did but 2 videos, I believe, about this. You can check them out to see in more detail about this. But to wrap things up, I found that as a person that doesn't just use games and I have a pretty high-end CPU, I think Nvidia for this generation at least is just better for me. Didn't have the crashes, slightly cheaper price, DLSS, the fact that it works better with DaVinci Resolve. It's just a better deal for me. But if you're in this for just purely gaming, it might be better to go with AMD, or it might not be such a fault depending on what kind of prices you can find. But again, this is just you know, a couple things I want to share with you guys just in case if and when the card inventory stock situation gets back to normality. I know I don't have a huge sample size. It was just a couple of cards I was dealing with. So for those guys that have been able to get cards, let me know if your sentiments were the same as far as AMD and Nvidia goes, and let me know if you disagree, agree, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.